A very good morning to you, and I want to hope that you're doing fine. I am fine myself, and today we're going to learn about carbohydrates. That is our third topic about the nutrients. We're going to learn about carbohydrates, and I know that you've heard about nutrients. I introduced that in our first class. We talked on several issues relating to nutrients. And now, of course, we mentioned that we have the macro and the micronutrients as the two major classes of nutrients. And among the macro, which we say they are required in large amounts in the body, are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So we're going to look at carbohydrates, which may be classified as monosaccharides, disaccharides, or polysaccharides, depending on the number of the monomer, that is the sugar units they contain. And they constitute a very large part of food, such as the rice, the noodles, the bread, grain-based products, etc. So you'll find that it's important to have them in the diet because they're the ones responsible for helping us have sufficient sugars that will help us function normally, especially the brain uses glucose. So in case there is a spike in the blood glucose level, spike means the rise. There is a sharp increase in the blood glucose levels after ingestion of simple sugars. It is thought to be related to some of the heart and vascular diseases, which have become more frequent in recent times. Simple sugars usually form a greater part of the diet than formerly, perhaps leading to more cardiovascular diseases. The degree of causation is still not clear. We find that simple carbohydrates are absorbed quickly and therefore raise the blood sugar levels more rapidly than other nutrients. However, the most important plant carbohydrates that varies in its digestible than plain starch, and starches which are plain very refined particles are more also absorbable during digestion. So that is our introduction of carbohydrates. So as we learn about these nutrients, the main objective is that by the end of this topic, you should be able to find carbohydrates, be able to test the basic unit of carbohydrates in the other sources, also should be able to test the functions of carbohydrates, and also describe the digestion and absorption of carbohydrates. So we've already said that carbohydrates can be grouped into monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. So maybe we'll begin with the carbohydrates, that is the chemical structure. You will get that from your notes. It's not complex, but this is not our major focus. We just need to know that usually carbohydrates are divided into monosaccharides, disaccharides, oligosaccharides. In the monosaccharides, we have glucose, and usually this is sugar found within the dextrose or blood sugar, and it's usually metabolized glycogen in the liver through a process called glycogenesis. So whenever glucose is required in the blood, but none is applied through digestion, glycogen is broken down to glucose through glycogenolysis. So glucose major sugar in blood, and it's the major sugar in the blood and preferred and absorbed by body cells. So the liver rearranges the other sugars to form glucose. So you'll find that in case you ingest food, whether the ngwashe, nduma, rice, chapati, bread, any of those carbohydrates, and ingest any excesses are stored usually in the muscles and a portion of it in the liver. So it is the liver that will rearrange all the sugars in glucose for the supply to your body. Then we do have fructose as a part of monosaccharide, and this sugar is found usually naturally in fruits and honey. We also have it in the high fructose corn syrup. So it usually metabolizes body to glucose and then glycogen for storage. So fructose, which is fruit sugar, is usually found mostly in fruits. So once you take that fruit, the sugar present in the fruit will be converted to glucose. And then in case there's any excess, will be stored to glycogen in the form of glycogen in the body. You said it's either in the muscles or in the liver. Then the third category of monosaccharide is called galactose. This sugar is usually found in the milk, like we have the milk lactose combined with glucose, and it's metabolized to glucose and used in energy production. It can also be metabolized to glycogen or fat for storage. What about the disaccharides? The disaccharides usually have again three groups of them. We have the maltose, sucrose, and lactose. Lactose is the main sugar. So with maltose, it is glucose plus glucose. Glucose make the maltose, and that is what we can easily find in the malt or beer. So that's why you find most people who take beer or alcohol, they're likely to have Arontophis kitambia. They have fats accumulating around their waist area because of the malt present within the beer. Sucrose is glucose plus fructose. So when you add a glucose molecule and fructose molecule, you're likely to get sucrose, which is present in the table sugar, honey sugar, and also maple sugar. Then the last category of disaccharide is lactose, which is glucose plus galactose. Glucose plus galactose, which is basically found in the milk products, and we commonly call it the milk sugar. We do have different types of complex carbohydrates. One of them is called the oligosaccharides. And when you talk about complex carbohydrates, they do contain many glucose units and a few monosaccharides strung together as polysaccharides. And we have three major importance in terms of nutrition, like glycogen, starch, and fiber. Glycogen is the storage for energy in the animal's body, that is the human body, and starch plays the same role in plants. So with the oligosaccharides, they are formed 3 to 10 monosaccharides together. So we have to measure oligosaccharides, which are cellulose, which are found in the cereals, like maize, whole grain rice, and any other cereal. Then we also have carbohydrates, then legumes, nuts, and other vegetables. Then we have the polysaccharides, which are formed when 3,000 monosaccharides are joined together, such as glycogen. Then we have some complex carbohydrates called fiber. We'll talk about dietary fiber. Carbohydrate that is completely not absorbed in humans and in some animals. So like all carbohydrates, when it's metabolized, it can produce 4 calories of energy per gram, and there are 2 subcategories, that is soluble and insoluble fiber, and there are many health benefits of a high fiber diet. Usually dietary fiber health are reduced in terms of gastrointestinal problems such as constipation and diarrhea. They're found in plants, foods, vegetables, fruits, grains, legumes, and their polysaccharides. So they're usually recommended about 20 to 35 grams per day in terms of their intake. So we do have examples of fiber like cellulose, usually is the constituent of plant vegetables, and I focus in vegetables, fruits, and legumes. So the characteristics of cellulose usually include 3 of the following. One, they are made up of connected long chains. Their chains do not also branch, and they are held together by beta bonds, and they are therefore indigestible by human enzymes. The fact that they are held together, they cannot be digested by the human being, so they only help digestion in helping remove waste from the body. Then we have the hemicelluloses. Within us, there are the main constituents of cellular fiber, and they're composed of various monosaccharides with branching side chains. Some are soluble and others insoluble depending on the arrangements of the chains. We also have peptides. They usually consist of a backbone of carbohydrates with side chains of monosaccharides. They're found mainly in vegetables and fruits, especially citrus fruits and apples. Pectins can be isolated and used by food industry to keep salad dressing from separating and also protect consistency. Pectins can perform many functions because they usually form in water. Then we have also gums, mucilages, as sometimes of fiber. So they're secreted by cut branch of plants, composed of various monosaccharides and their derivatives. Gums, for example, gum arabic are used as additives by food industry. Mucilages are similar to gum in structure, for example, carotene. Then they're added to food as stabilizers. Now that one is about food preservation and food processing. Learn more when you get there. also have lignin, and it has the dimensional structure that gives strength. Because of its toughness, it is rarely consumed by people. It's found in the woody parts of vegetables, e.g. carrots, or small seeds of, for example, the strawberries. We've said we have two types of fibers. We've said we have insoluble and soluble fibers. So maybe begin with the soluble fibers. They're usually mostly found in fruits, oats, barley, and also legumes. Fruits, oats, barley, and legumes. So they function in terms of delay the stomach emptying and the transit of iron through the intestines, delay glucose absorption, lower blood cholesterol, and the insoluble fibers are usually found mostly in vegetables, wheat, and also cereals. The insoluble ones, they accelerate the transit time through the intestines. Transit time is the period when the food waste are traveling through the waste are traveling within the intestines, from the small intestine to the large intestine to the rectum, then through the anus and exit out of the body. So the insoluble fibers, we're saying that mostly they're found within the vegetables, wheat, and cereals, and they'll accelerate the transit time through the intestines. Also increase fecal weight, and they slow starch and delay glucose absorption into blood. This is why you find it advisable for us to consume vegetables on a daily basis. Yeah, at every meal you should consume as much as both your hands can be able to scoop. Yeah. So both soluble and insoluble fiber influence transit time and nutrient absorption in the GI tract, that's the gastrointestinal tract. They are partially fermented microorganisms in the digestive tract for fragments that the body can use. Other physical properties of fibers that affect the GI function and nutrient absorption and water holding capacity. That is the capacity to capture water like sponge, swelling, and increasing bulk of the intestines. Contents also have viscosity, the capacity to solution calcium is exchange capacity, the ability to bind minerals. We also have bile, is binding capacity, the ability to bind bile, and lastly fermentability, the extent to which bacteria can ferment them in the digestive tract. We also have phytic acid, and these are non-nutrient compounds or nutrients that are part of the plant. It's also called phytates. They're found in the husks of grains, legumes, and seeds, as binding minerals like zinc, iron, calcium, magnesium, and copper. So health benefits of fiber, they do include enhanced weight control, it lowers blood cholesterol, it helps prevent colon cancer, prevent and control diabetes. Also, fiber helps to prevent and alleviate hemorrhoids. Also to prevent appendicitis, helps prevent diverticulitis of the colon, etc. Maybe you could research and tell me the difference between hemorrhoids, appendicitis, and diverticulitis when we meet in our class. In terms to take excess fiber, it displaces energy and nutrient-dense foods. It causes intestinal discomfort and digestion, and interferes with mineral absorption. Now, I've mentioned something about the phytic acid or the phytates. So we have it that because brains do have these anti-nutrients, we need to be able to find ways, as we are people who are in the industry in terms of cooking, we need to find ways in which we shall cook food and allow people to consume them in such a manner that we are not interfering with their zinc, iron, calcium, magnesium, and copper absorption. How do we go about this? Like for grains, usually to say that you can do what you can do, like a whole peeling it. Put a carrot or carrots, depending on the quantity of food that you're cooking, into that given food that you're boiling. Let it suck up those fats. And you'll find that people want to have stomach aches, and again, you'll have reduced the phytic effect within the foods. Again, you can also soak them overnight so that you can be able to cook them the following day, or you can cook them for about 20 minutes. Once they start making foam, you discard the water and put fresh water and cook. Then you ensure that because of the iron and calcium absorption, you ensure that the foods that follow after that given are within a space of 30 minutes to 1 hour, so that, for example, you're taking some iron-rich food or calcium-rich food, let it come like 30 minutes, after or 1 hour after. Same to the tea, the caffeine that we take in the tea, in the coffee, in the chocolates. They do have tannins, which are also anti-nutrients that inhibit iron and calcium absorption. It's always good to take note of that. We have a section called glycemic index, and this is just the rate at which bad glucose sugars are released. But the glycemic effect is the effect of food on blood glucose, and then how quickly glucose is absorbed after the person eats, how high glucose is, and how quickly it returns to normal. So fast absorption and glucose and overreduction that causes glucose below normal are undesirable, and that it is likely to bring about diabetes because of the high sugar that are present within the blood. Remember, we said that any excesses of carbohydrates are the ones giving us sugar. Excesses are stored in the liver or the bone muscles. But it's fast that the body can store all of that, and it's present in the bloodstream, so that it is left the sugar cardiovascular disease and diabetes. So different foods have different glycemic effects. For example, ice cream, which is a sugar food, produces less response compared to potatoes, high starch food. It's also depending on whether a food is eaten alone or as a mixed meal. Also, about the glycemic index, have it that eating small meals frequently spreads glucose across the day. Therefore, it has the same advantage as food low glycemic index. So you don't heap food at once. Just a plate, mlima, nyama mlima, you eat at once, 5 hours or 10 hours through the day before you eat the next meal. You can eat small frequent meals across the day, be able to spread your glucose effectively. This is very important for people with diabetes. Secondary should be improve glucose control. Remember, people, places that who are eating or working in the hospital setup or in the community in a certain home, depending, you may not know where you work. So you need to put that in mind. So that's the functions of carbohydrates. Usually you find that we do have several functions, and the major one is one that we know too well: energy production. Usually carbohydrates are very important for energy production, because remember, the body will need energy for its movement, for its normal functioning, for you to sit, listen, for you to be in class, for you to sit for exams, for you to walk around, for you to engage in digging or any other activity. You need energy. So your body cells need energy. This energy comes basically from carbohydrates, but also fats and proteins can also be used for energy production, but the main source is carbohydrates. Then we have specific energies, whereby we find that brain and the red blood cells depend on carbohydrates as a source of energy. They cannot use fat directly for energy. So if carbohydrate is low in diet, proteins are converted to glucose to provide energy. Then we also have protein consumption. We call it the protein sparing action. So you'll find that proteins can produce energy. That energy should not be utilized by the body, but rather the body should be able to use these proteins that should be sufficient for its building and repair of its tissues. Regulation of blood glucose. Remember, we do have the normal levels of blood glucose. Normal levels range between 70 to 120 milligrams per deciliter. Hyperglycemia, with a condition of elevated blood sugar, is greater than 170 milligrams per deciliter. Hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar in the body, is less than 4 to 5 milligrams per deciliter. So, blood glucose is very important, or rather, carbohydrates are important in terms of regulation of blood glucose. Another function of the carbohydrates, which is hormonal regulation. You'll find that insulin is regulated by the level of glucose in the blood. So it's secreted when the blood glucose is high, and when the insulin allows glucose into cells, and excess glucose is converted to glycogen in the liver and also in the muscles. Glucagon is secreted when one is hungry, that is fasting state. So usually when the body is is in a state that maybe you stay hungry the whole day, that one we call it fasting. Or maybe from night you didn't even take your breakfast, it's already lunchtime. So across the day, up to that given time, your body was in a fasting state. Or you could be fasting spiritually for those of us who engage in prayer and fasting. When you're not eating and you're not feeding your body with any form of glucose, you'll find that your body needs sufficient energy to keep it going, because the heart is pumping, your brain needs to keep functioning normally, so you think accordingly, you think logically, you make decisions, you're able to engage and do things with your hands, engage your body. So once the excess glucose has been converted to glycogen and stored in the liver and muscles, we have another hormone that helps in the regulation of the blood sugars. And this one is called glucose, which is excreted when we are feeling hungry or in the fasting state, and now converts the glycogen back to glucose. During this time, the blood glucose level is increased, which leads to glycogen being broken down to glucose, also protein, which is used to make glucose. So that is it about carbohydrates. You can read further about the basal metabolic rate, that is basal metabolism, which is just the energy needed based on maintaining life. Our body is complete rest. And when you talk about the rate, it's the rate at which is for maintenance of the above activities. And people have different metabolic rates, basal metabolism rates, and they usually activity of metabolism include maintenance of body temperature, inhaling and exhaling air by lungs, bone marrow making blood cells, they are beating 100,000 times a day, also kidney filtration from the different parts of the body. Those are all metabolism processes. But we do have factors that do affect the BMR, the basal metabolic rate, like age. We find that because of different ages, the lean body mass diminishes with age, so it slows down the BMR. The height in tall, thin people, the BMR is very high, unlike the thin, short counterparts. Both in children, you'll find that children and pregnant women, the BMR is high due to the growth-related needs, also the body composition. The leaner the tissues, the higher the BMR, and more fat tissue, and the lower the BMR. So fear also raises the BMR, because when someone is sick, like people who are being malarial bacterial infection, they're likely to have fever. It also raises the BMR. Stress in life also raises the BMR because of issues to do with work, school, just general life issues, relationships. Stress brings up the BMR. Environmental temperature, both the heat and cold raise the BMR, since the body needs to maintain hemothermic conditions, normal body temperature. Also have fasting and starvation, which are a factor in terms of lowering the BMR due to less activities and need to conserve energy. Malnutrition lowers BMR due to less availability of energy. Hormones like the thyroid hormone thyroxine can speed or slow down BMR, the one which is present in the throat area. Smoking, like nicotine, increases energy expenditure, so it raises the BMR. Caffeine increases energy expenditure and also sleep. Here, the BMR is lowest when sleeping due to reduced activity. So I want to hope that there is something that we've picked up about carbohydrates. And remember, it's through these carbohydrates that we get energy for life. Maybe we'll briefly look at the digestion and absorption of carbohydrates. Usually in the mouth, the salivary starts to hydrolyze starch to short up polysaccharide into maltose. So simply what we're saying is that in the mouth, we have the salivary amylase, which is the enzyme that is present to digest the shorter polysaccharide and starch, hydrolyzed starch to shorter polysaccharides and also maltose. Remember, maltose, we said it's a form of the sugars, the saccharides, and polysaccharides is third category of the carbohydrates, and it forms a group of complex carbohydrates. So usually the shorter strands of carbohydrates are broken down in the mouth by use of the salivary amylase. Then we have in the stomach the salivary enzyme amylase is digested by protein digesting enzymes. So that is therefore not digested because there are no enzymes to digest carbohydrates. So fibers delay the gastric emptying, and this provides a feeling of fullness and satiety. So in the stomach, there is no digestion of carbohydrate that takes place. So where the digestion of carbohydrates begins, it begins in the mouth. At the stomach, there is nothing happening much. But now in the small intestines, we have the pancreatic amylase that enters the intestine by the pancreatic duct and conducts, breaking down polysaccharides to sugar glucose chains and disaccharides. The final step takes place on the outer membranes of the intestinal walls. So then in action, we are seeing that we have maltase that breaks down the maltose into two glucose molecules. Then sucrase breaks down one glucose and one fructose molecules, breaks sucrose into glucose and one fructose molecules. Lactase breaks lactose into one glucose and one galactose molecules. So with fructose and galactose, they're processed in the liver to form glucose. The fibers delay absorption of carbohydrates and fats in the small intestines, and fiber in the intestines binds the minerals. So it can cause a risky deficiency, and this can be kept minimal when taken in moderation. So in the large intestines, you'll find that within 1 to 4 hours, a meal or sugars and most starches are digested. Bacteria in the intestine start, and the intestinal tract ferments the fibers. So you'll find that usually, normally within 1 to 4 hours, after taking a carbohydrate meal, you're likely to feel full. But after that, you start feeling hungry. So we're saying that at that given point, after about 4 hours, a maximum of about 4 hours, you find that bacteria in the intestine will start fermenting the fibers. And this process generates water, gas, and short chain fatty acids. The short chain fatty acids are absorbed in the colon and are used for energy. Fiber contributes to up to 15% of the daily food energy. So in the last step, usually how does absorption take place? Glucose can be absorbed in the mouth, as we've seen. Then monosaccharides are absorbed in the cells lining the small intestines with active transport and are taken up by the circulation. Also, we have the liver, fructose, and galactose that are converted to glucose and other compounds. Then we do have the waste being excreted out of the body after the absorption and assimilation. Remember, we talked about the normal glucose homeostasis. We say that the normal blood glucose is 80 to 120 milligrams per deciliter, and we do have two hormones that keep regulating the glycogen in the blood, that is the insulin and the glucagon hormones. You can revisit that because I've already mentioned about it. So, in summary, we've talked about carbohydrates, and we said we have three major categories. We have the monosaccharides, we have the disaccharides, and we have the polysaccharides. Now, we've looked at several definitions that you need maybe to have in mind, like homeostasis. It's the maintaining an equilibrium in environment in the body. For example, homeostasis that maintains blood glucose levels 60 to 120 milligrams per deciliter. Then hyperglycemia is high concentration of glucose in the blood that is above 120 milligrams per deciliter. Insulin is a hormone from the pancreas, and it helps to regulate the blood sugars, whereby it helps in the conversion of the glucose to glycogen. About glucagon, it's another hormone released by the pancreas, and it helps to convert the glucose that has been stored in the liver back to the glycogen back to glucose, so that raise blood sugar levels in case one is fasting. Then gluconeogenesis is whereby the liver makes glucose from the protein. It makes the glucose from the protein and glycogen. We have the basal metabolism, where we say is the energy needed to maintain life in the body is at complete rest. You see, we have the rate, the basal metabolic rate, BMR, which is the rate at which the body spends energy maintenance of the above activities. And also we have the body composition of the muscles, bone fat, and other tissues that make up a person's total body weight. So, in essence, we've been able to cover carbohydrates and chemical compounds that contain carbohydrates, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and they include the sugars, starches, and fibers. We've mentioned that we have simple carbohydrates, which include the monosaccharides and disaccharides, and are found in the foods like table sugar, honey, and fruits. We have complex carbohydrates and polysaccharides, and include glycogen in animals and starches, and fibers in plants. And we learned about the health benefits of fiber. We've also looked at different ways the energy is utilized and calculated. We discussed also the way the digestion process of carbohydrates. So you can get in touch to get reading. In case you have any query, also feel free to ask. Or maybe we can look at lipids. I think it is more brief compared to the proteins. We shall look at the proteins last in the next lesson. So lipids are organic compounds. This is an introduction to lipids, and most of which don't dissolve in water. And as I began in the first lesson, first topic, I mentioned that you'll find that fats, or rather lipids, which include both fats and oils, they do make, every 1 gram of such gives 9 kilocalories. I do hope you remember that. So they have a concentrated form of energy, and they're important structural component of cells, particularly in the brain and nervous system. And as a component of all cell membranes, the lipids protect the internal environment of cells and the layer of adipose tissue that lies under the skin and around internal organs, protects the body from changes in temperature, and also provides a cushion to protect against a shock. Lipids help transport fat-soluble substances such as vitamins A, E, and D through the intestinal tract and bloodstream, and they are needed for the synthesis of hormones that regulate the blood function. So in this subtopic on lipids, by the end of it, you should be able to assess the difference between lipids and fats, differentiate also between saturated fatty acid and unsaturated fatty acids, discuss the role of lipids in the body, also assess the functions of a fat in the diet. So basically, fats and lipids are solid at room temperature. Oils are lipids that are liquid at room temperature. That is the difference between fats and oils. So they dissolve in chloroform, benzene, and ether, but not in water. We do have different types of fatty acids. Remember, fatty acid is the smallest unit of the lipid. So we do have saturated fatty acids and unsaturated fatty acids. So when you talk about saturated fatty acids, they refer to fatty acids in which the carbon atoms are bound to as many hydrogens as possible and therefore contains no carbon-to-carbon double bond. For example, stearic. And then when we talk about unsaturated fatty acids, they refer to a fatty acid that contains one or more carbon-to-carbon double bonds, e.g. monounsaturated fatty acid contains one carbon-to-carbon double bond, e.g. oleic acid, like olive oil, while polyunsaturated fatty acids contain 2 or more carbon, that is carbon-to-carbon double bond, e.g. linoleic acid and linolenic acid, corn, soybeans, and sunflower food sources. Also, omega-3 fatty acid has a double bond at the 3rd carbon, e.g. linolenic acid, like the fish oils. For example, we commonly give children the omega-3, that is a fish oil, or C, call it C what? I will remember, the one that we give to children. Then when we talk about omega-6, it has fatty acid as a double bond at the 6th carbon, e.g. linoleic acid, omega-3, and omega-6 are essential fatty acids. Now, when you talk about these fatty acids, I think what is coming out strongly for us to understand is that unsaturated fatty acids are better than saturated. The saturated ones don't have any carbon-to-carbon double bond, but the unsaturated fatty acids have at least one or more carbon-to-carbon double bonds. And when we talk about the monounsaturated and the polyunsaturated, as we're giving examples of the olive oils, we're talking about the sunflower oils, the corn, we are talking about omega-3 that is present in the fish. That is really healthy because it has nutrients that will help boost the immune system and help us to be okay. So what are the functions of lipids? They do form part of the vital structures in the body, like for growth. They also take part in the immune system and vision. They do take part in immune system and division, and form cell membrane. Those are common like compounds and example eicosanoids. So we have essential and essential fatty acids. When we talk about the essential ones, there are those that must be present in the diet to maintain health because they cannot be synthesized by the body in adequate amounts. But when we talk about the essential, those ones the body can produce, the body can be able to make by itself. So we don't really have to produce them. We have to buy them in the diet. So basically, carbohydrates will give us energy. They help the transportation of fatty soluble vitamin, that is they regulate and protect against adipose tissue, body organs. They provide at least 50% of energy used by the body at stress and limits of energy for muscles and limited storage for energy. We've heard about cholesterol and still part of the fats. It's good for the body in terms of being needed for synthesis of steroid hormones. That is estrogen, testosterone, vitamin calcitriol. They will help fat emulsification. It's also part of the cell structure, and too much cholesterol is associated with heart disease and cancer. So we need it, but not too much of it. We need just sufficient. We have a category of lipids called the lipoproteins, and these are lipids that are transported in the blood attached to a protein. The way we have the protein at the end of the word, lipoprotein, lipid, lipoprotein transported in the blood attached to a protein. We usually have the LDL and HDL lipoproteins. The LDL means it's we have LDL cholesterol, that is the low density lipoprotein cholesterol, and we have the high density lipoprotein cholesterol. Much of it you can get from the notes, and in case you have any questions surrounding the lipids and those lipoproteins, you can be able to consult so that you can be able to know, but we'll focus on our objective. But I have some extra information for you in your notes. With fats, I think we've learned much about it in terms of their functioning, in terms of their sources. Maybe it's important for us to focus on the digestion of fats and lipids and oils, the oil sensors which constitute the lipids. On average, you find that the gastrointestinal tract receives 50 to 100 grams of triglycerides per day, of which 4 to 8 grams of phospholipids and 300 to 450 milligrams of cholesterol is present. So about lipid digestion, the goal is to break down the triglycerides into small molecules that the body can absorb and use, for example, monoglycerides, fatty acids, and also glycerol. So in the mouth, digestion starts off slowly in the mouth, by salivary glands at the base of the tongue release lipase enzymes that plays a small role in fat digestion. This enzyme is more active in infants than adults. And in infants, these enzymes efficiently digest the short and medium chain fatty acids found in milk. In the stomach, there's little fat digestion, so mostly it floats on top of their food components. In the small intestine, when fat enters the small intestine, the hormone cholecystokin, that is the CKD signals the gallbladder to release its stores of bile which is an emulsifier. So the liver manufactures bile acids from cholesterol, and the gallbladder stores the bile until it is needed. At the end of each bile acid, a side chain of amino acids, and at the other end is sterol portion that is attracted to fat. So bile draws fat molecules into the surrounding water liquids, and then the fat meet lipase enzymes from the pancreas and small intestine and are fully digested. So we have the emulsification of fat by bile in the stomach. We're saying that the gastrointestinal juices tend to separate and the enzyme in the water and can't get the fat. When the fat enters the small intestine, the gallbladder secretes bile, and the bile has an affinity for both fat and water, so it can bring the fat into solution in the water. And after emulsification, fat is mixed in the water solution, and so the enzymes do have an access to it, and therefore they're utilized in the body. So what about the fats absorption? Usually glycerol, short chain and medium chain fatty acids diffuse into the intestinal cells and are absorbed directly into the bloodstream. We have the larger units, the monosaccharides and long chains fatty acid merge into complexes called micelles. The micelles easily diffuse into the intestinal cells once inside the monoglycerides, and the long chain fatty acids are reassembled into new triglycerides. In the intestinal walls, the triglycerides and other large lipids, cholesterol and phospholipids, are packed into transport vehicles known as chylomicrons, and the intestinal cells then release the chylomicrons into the lymphatic system. Oh, yes. So, lipid transportation is transported within the system. They're transported in the blood as lipoproteins, and there are 4 different kinds of lipoproteins. We do have the chylomicrons, we have the LDL and the HDL. So chylomicrons transport lipids to the liver. Special receptor membranes of the liver cells recognize and remove the lipids from the blood. So in the liver, chylomicrons are broken down. The very low density lipoproteins are present there. The liver picks up the fatty acids arriving from the blood and use them to make cholesterol, other fatty acids, and other compounds. There are several factors that improve the low density lipoprotein to high density lipoprotein ratio, like weight control when we do exercises, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats used instead of saturated ones, soluble fibers and antioxidants, and moderate alcohol consumption and also physical activity. Functions of the lipids in the body, basically, maybe in summary, it's that they do provide energy, ventilate the body against extreme temperatures, protect against shock, and building the cell structures. So in case we have any excess of lipids in the body that are usually stored in the body, remember we say that fat provides more than 2 times the energy carbohydrate and fat, making it an extremely carbohydrate and protein, making it an extremely efficient storage form of energy. So the body storage for energy in adipose tissue is unlimited. Adipose cells have a special enzyme on their surface, lipase, that captures circulating triglycerides from the lipoproteins and hydrolyzes them to fatty acids and monoglycerides. Inside the cell, the enzymes reassemble the pieces for storage. So it's usually stored in the adipose tissue in case of any excesses. That is why when you consume fatty foods, the deep fried foods, what the HFSS, the high fat, sugar, salt diet, they're likely to be stored in the adipose tissues and they're likely to increase weight. So, what are the health benefits of fat? When you take a lot of fat, we are likely to bring about heart disease, especially if cholesterol is high. Also have risks from saturated fats as they raise the blood cholesterol. We also have effects of polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fatty acids. In case of high intake, in terms of they're likely to lower the cholesterol, also polyunsaturated fatty acids lower both HDL and LDL. Unsaturated fats raises the HDL, the high density lipoprotein. We also have risks from trans fatty acids since they raise the LDL and lower HDL, like some saturated fats. Also benefits from the fatty acids, like preventing blood clots, they lower the blood pressure, etc., and cancer, whereby the dietary fat is linked to some types of cancer in animal studies. So brings about obesity because of the intake of the fat contributes fast rate and weight. We've also looked here at the lipids, of which we've demonstrated these and talked about some 4 classes of lipids found in the body. You can check through your notes, and I want you to be able to, by now, you should be able to define a lipid, also explain those different classes, distinguish between monosaccharides and monounsaturated and polysaturated fats. Also be able to name the functions of fats in the diet, and also health effects, negative health effects of fats in the diet. Also, you should be able to mention the functions of essential fatty acids in the body. That's it for today. I do hope that we shall interact more in our next class, as we shall focus on the proteins. Have a nice time.